what's she gonna think? And I was very nervous, but afterwards, we worked, all of us, we worked very hard on it, and Sandra Fries was the dialect coach, and she really helped us a lot. It was a lot of hard work, but it was also good being there and sort of, you know, being in London with everyone, and the whole crew was basically from London as well, so you always heard them, so you got to pick up different things as well. So.
Great. Yes, up here, ma'am.
I imagine when you were back in 1962 as the writer and director of this film, that your mother, was she inspirational at all as far as the Natalie character, or was she more like the Emma character? I mean, was that really, the two sides of that whole female thing was really, really came home for me, because of that, I'm from that same generation. So.
Question about the, I guess, influences on the creation of the Natalie character.
I kind of think of women who were mothers in that period, mothers of my generation, as a sort of lost generation of women, trapped between the stifling domesticity of the 50s, not yet with the vocabulary of change of the later 60s, sort of despised for being mothers, and yet despised if they weren't mothers, and so on. So a really, really tough time. And I did see that in my own mother's story, although Natalie is not a portrait of her, but I met a whole generation of women who are actually heroes. And it took me a long time to figure that one out. But I have. And you know, we're all here thanks to them. They stand on their shoulders and for the very specific kinds of sacrifices that they made that had no name, actually. So.
Yes.
When you do a memory film that's so personal, how did you avoid the kind of nostalgia or sentimentality that men seem to always bring to this?
How did you avoid the nostalgia and sentimentality that men often bring to such memory films?
Well, not only men, and also it's not only memory. I felt a lot of it was observation and a lot of imagination, some memory, and probably some false memory. You know, making the film itself becomes a memory. I think, however, I was aware of the possible trap of nostalgia, and certainly that of sentimentality. And the way to avoid sentimentality, which is kind of false feeling, was all the time to try and go for truth, and that was some true feeling, and that was something that we discussed a great deal, all of us. And as for nostalgia, I never thought of it actually as a period film. This was something I discussed a lot with the people behind the camera. We were not looking back, we were in these characters' present time. So it could never become a chocolate box version of itself. It had to be as austere in a way, and as bleak as the very bones of experience.
Okay, questions? Yes, Ray.
Can you talk about the role of music in the movie and how you came to your selections?
Can you talk about the role of music in the movie and how the selections were made?
Well, fairly early on, I made the decision to not have a conventional score as such. Not a score that told you not to listen to it, which is often the function of scores, telling you what to feel, but rather to put music in that was the music that was the soundtrack to these characters' lives, the music that they would be listening to. So it became kind of character notes, actually. Listened to hundreds of hours of the hit parade from 1960, 61 and 1962, and lots of jazz, and eventually arrived at this selection in the cutting room movie. But I wanted all the sounds, not just the music, to be there, to be listened to, for it to become a sensitizing process with the ears, because there are things that these people want to listen to, and there are things that these people do not want to hear. So that meant creating kind of a mixture of silences and sounds that would sensitize the ear, was the intention anyway.
Can you talk about the inclusion of the Annette Bening, Oliver Platts, the Tim Spall trio? They're really very intriguing and kind of, again, another interesting counterpoint to what's going on.
Well, this is in part based on an observation that often gay couples have to work harder at being adult, and they are the same, the adults of the story actually, and the outsiders in a way, and how sometimes in difficult family situations it's people outside the family who can be very special connections and a voice of sanity or of tenderness actually. Those three actors embodied that so well. I kind of feel like there's love oozing out of Timothy Spall and between them, and Annette carries that quality of vivid intelligence, sort of cutting intelligence and so on.
Yes, over here, ma'am. You, Greg.
So this is a question for Sally. Your work has become increasingly, has moved increasingly towards a more straightforward narrative. And I'm wondering in this film, what kinds of elements of experimentation were you working with, or how do you put that more to the side?
You said that your work over the years, Sally, has moved away from some of the experimentation of your early work towards this more traditional narrative. And are there elements here, though, that you feel are still in keeping with your earlier experimental kind of work?
No, it's later experimental work. And the later experimental work is to not want to be so self-consciously experimental. But rather, it was my experiment with allowing myself to be in love with the form, you know, and love with storytelling and character, and try and do something simple. I remember there's a quote from Hemingway or something, his ambition became to do one true sentence. And I felt that my ambitions with this were modest in that sense, but I wanted to go deep and be true, and for there to be nowhere to hide in the film, not for the characters, not for me, not for anything. It's bare and it's spare, and that is a different kind of experimentation.
Okay, one more, yes.
Ginger and Rosa, and I feel I saw so much about Ginger, much less about Rosa. Is that how you finish this book originally, or it's not?
Yeah. This viewer says that the film is called Ginger and Rosa, but she felt it was very much about, or more focused on Ginger. And if you could, so was that really your intention, or
it was originally called Roland, actually. Compromise.
It did have another name originally, but anyway, yes. Ginger is the axis of the story. That was the shooting principle, and it is told from her point of view. There is no, although as a writer I tried to step into the shoes of each character with love, care and attention and make that empathetic leap, but the cinematic storytelling principle is that this is Ginger's story, and Rosa's presence at the beginning and her gradual absence is part of the central part of the tragedy.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I want to thank everyone. It was a wonderful film, and thank you all very much.